It's September 11th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with a wrap-up of the G20 Summit in New Delhi. President Yoon has pledged $2.3 billion for Ukraine's reconstruction. He also met with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The two agreed to make swift efforts for a trilateral summit with China. An earthquake in Morocco has left over 2,100 people dead. Villagers continue to dig by hand and shovel to find the survivors. Russia's East Economic Forum has kicked off in Vladivostok, where North Korea's Kim Jong-un and Russia's Vladimir Putin are widely believed to sit down for talks. No significant movement spotted on Kim Jong-un yet. South Korean President Yoon laid out ways for his country to fulfill its responsible diplomacy as he put his vision of global freedom, peace and prosperity into action at G20 Summit. That included more funding for Ukraine. Our Oh Soo-young searched us off this morning.
President Yoon has pledged $2.3 billion to support recovery efforts in Ukraine and renewed his call for universal norms on digital technology, presenting ways to secure a prosperous future for the world. Speaking at the G20 Summit on Sunday, Yoon said Seoul will announce a $300 million package for Ukraine in 2024 and a $2 billion mid to long-term support plan consisting of long-term low-interest loans in 2025. The initial $300 million package will cover development cooperation and humanitarian aid, which would include the participation of international organizations such as the World Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. This comes after President Yoon in July had a surprise meeting in Kyiv with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky and pledged to roll out official development assistance to help rebuild the war-torn nation.
This demonstrates Seoul's responsible role in leading the way to support the restoration of peace as a global pivotal state that contributes to freedom, peace and prosperity in the world, while also laying the foundation for full-scale participation in Ukraine's reconstruction in the future.
Further elaborating on South Korea's role and contribution to a free and rules-based international order, President Yoon also emphasized the need to strengthen the role of multilateral development banks. In order to respond to new challenges such as overcoming the climate crisis and strengthening food and energy security, Yoon said it is vital to expand available financial resources and debt restructuring programs for low-income countries. Yoon pledged efforts to lead such discussions as Seoul serves as a co-chair along with France in the G20's International Financial Architecture Working Group. Addressing the fast-evolving advancement of digital technology, President Yoon renewed his push to establish new universal norms and established an international organization that addresses the misuse of technology and the widening digital gap between societies. A presidential official said Seoul will soon prepare and announce a digital bill of rights that ensures all people in all societies can enjoy the right to digital technology and push for measures to address the benefits and side effects of AI and digital tech, as well as the need for a consensus on ethical and moral norms. The South Korean leader in June proposed a set of basic principles on the ethical and sustainable use of technology.
President Yoon stressing the importance and necessity of digital norms has been recognized by the international community, as shown by the G20 Summit communique, which reflects Seoul's plan for cooperation in establishing international AI governance.
Presenting measures to pursue freedom, peace and prosperity in the world amid complex challenges and bridging gaps between the global north and south. The top office says President Yoon aims to solidify Korea's status as a responsible actor in the international community as a global pivotal state. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, New Delhi.
And President Yoon tried to make the best out of a diplomatic super week by sitting down with more than 20 leaders from around the world on the sidelines. He particularly made sure to reiterate Seoul's pledges at the Camp David Summit to world leaders. Kim Do-yeon reports.
Wrapping up the diplomatic super week of ASEAN and G20 summits, the presidential office said Sunday that what was achieved during the overseas trip reflects what South Korea, the US, and Japan declared at the Camp David summit just a few weeks ago.
The principles and spirit of Camp David have provided a basis for agreements during summits on ASEAN and G20. Specifically speaking, the trilateral cooperation of Camp David aims to contribute to the Indo-Pacific region, especially in areas such as development, maritime security, and the growth of advanced digital technology.
This also comes as President Yoon reconnected with the other two leaders from the Camp David summit. Although short, Yoon and Japan's Fumio Kishida met to reaffirm their commitment to taking responsibility with regard to ongoing global crises. In addition, the two spoke about preparations for a trilateral summit between Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing, possibly a move to seek Beijing's cooperation in dealing with North Korea's recent provocative behaviors. He also met with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden a few times, exchanging light jokes and conversation, while sitting next to him for an hour and a half during the gala dinner, an opportunity to speak candidly about ongoing issues. According to the top office, Yoon also met with the leaders of more than 20 countries during this past week, using the opportunity to drum up support for Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. The final vote on hosting duties will take place at the Bureau International des Expositions in 2 months. He made sure to let those leaders know that the Busan Expo will focus on solutions to crises the world faces today. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And on the sidelines of G20 Summit in New Delhi, President Yoon Suk-yeol sat down with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As key strategic partners, they agreed to deepen cooperation in space, defense, and infrastructure. Our Lee Kyung-un has the details.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have agreed to cooperate as key strategic partners in the Indo-Pacific region. The leaders held a bilateral meeting on Sunday on the sidelines of the G20 summit in New Delhi as the two countries mark a milestone year in diplomatic ties.
The summit focused on expanding the balance in trade, investment in digital and green industries and advanced technologies, while expanding public-private cooperation, marking 50 years of diplomatic ties.
Among the key sectors will be space, on the back of South Korea's successful launch of its first homegrown space rocket Nuri in May, and India having made history by becoming the first country to land on the lunar South Pole region.
We will push for space cooperation between South Korea's soon-to-be-launched space agency and India's space agency, boasting 50 years of history. And we will foster research in space missions and satellites at a joint research center in India.
On the defense front, Yoon and Modi also agreed on South Korea's continued provision of its K-9 howitzer and expand arms trade. And they also expect more active business exchanges with the easing of customs procedures under the expected launch of an electronic certificates of origin platform this year. Also under a $4 billion development cooperation fund by South Korea, domestic companies are expected to take part in more of India's infrastructure projects like smart cities. The meeting comes after President Yoon also met with Korean companies there and vowed to address their concerns to Modi, such as India's recent export restrictions on electronic devices, high tariffs on food, and lack of infrastructure projects for companies to take part in. Jong-un, Arirang News.
The death toll from Friday's deadly quake that struck Morocco continues to rise. Local authorities say that the deadliest quake to hit the country in 6 decades has killed at least 2,100 people. Shin Se-byuk has the latest.
More than 2,100 people have been killed and over 2,400 injured in Friday's powerful earthquake in Morocco. The 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck with an epicenter some 72 kilometers southwest of the North African country's historic city, Marrakesh. The deadliest quake to hit the country in 6 decades was quick to turn buildings and homes into rubble.
Everything is gone. We lost everything. We lost our entire house.
There are still people buried here in this house. They didn't get the rescue they needed, so they died.
The United States Geological Survey on Sunday issued a red alert in preliminary assessments for both estimated fatalities and estimated economic loss caused by the quake. This is the highest possible alert level in the agency's 4-tier alert system. This means, in terms of economic impact, extensive damage is probable and economic losses could range up to 2% of Morocco's GDP. The agency also expects that there is a 35% chance that the death toll could rise to 10,000 people and a 21% chance casualties to range between 10,000 to 100,000. Meanwhile, the Moroccan government on Saturday declared a 3-day national mourning period as rescue efforts continue. The government is mobilizing armed forces to provide affected areas with supplies such as drinking water, food, and blankets. Foreign aid is also coming into the country. Turkey, where a deadly earthquake killed more than 50,000 people in February, is among the countries lending a hand. Algeria, which broke off ties with Morocco over a diplomatic row 2 years ago, also said it would open its airspace for humanitarian and medical aid. The United States has also dispatched a team of disaster experts to assess the situation and to identify humanitarian needs. Other countries such as Spain, France, and Israel are also deploying resources and personnel to provide necessary support to Morocco. 신새벽 아리랑 뉴스.
Russia has kicked off its economic forum in Vladivostok, where a North Korea-Russia summit is widely expected. There are reports that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is traveling to the Russian city today, but there are no immediate signs of his arrival yet. For more, we're joined by Professor Jarrell Atkinson this morning. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Now, Professor, would you say North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has changed his travel route like South Korea's spy agency did say last week?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Putin is expected to be in Vladivostok in Russia's Far East from today to attend the Eastern Economic Forum. So Kim Jong-un last met Putin in Vladivostok for a summit in 2019. So Kim traveling to meet him there would make a lot of sense. But according to South Korea's intelligence services, there have been no signs that his armored train is ready to move. So this means he'll either be going a bit later or take another mode of transport or perhaps meet Putin at a later date. So given the possibility of this Putin-Kim meeting was publicized by the US, and given how concerned Kim Jong-un typically is about secrecy and security, it's very possible that the summit may happen at an unexpected time and location if it happens at all.
Mm-hmm. The whole meetup is all about Russia wanting weapons from North Korea to use against Ukraine, and the North may get Russian technology or even food out of Russia, right? Now, how might such military cooperation between North Korea and Russia not be a win-win situation at the end?
Well, by all accounts, Russia's burning through war material at a very fast pace in Ukraine, and North Korea has failed at a few satellite launch attempts lately, and is trying to field more sophisticated weapons and weapons platforms like submarines that can launch nuclear ballistic missiles. And obviously with Russia as a world leader in military tech, it could really benefit from Russian know-how and components. So each certainly has a potential to get something it values out of closer cooperation. And also their drawing closer together will potentially increase the leverage each has over Seoul and Washington. But I would say it's only a win-win to the extent that the invasion of Ukraine is a good thing for Russia, and that these missile and nuclear weapons program is a good thing for North Korea. And also to the extent that both benefit from having a hostile relationship with the West. So I would expect their closer cooperation will probably harden attitudes in Seoul and Washington, not soften them, and it will likely increase South Korea's strategic cooperation with Japan. And worse than that really is it will only keep the war in Ukraine going, and it will keep North Korea's weapons program going, when it would actually be much better for ordinary Russians if Putin pulled out of Ukraine and if Kim Jong-un directed the resources he's putting into the military into raising living standards instead.
Right, it looks like the arms deals will only tighten the friendship between North Korea and Russia. But the question is, why does Russia want to consolidate the Pyongyang-Moscow-Beijing partnership? I mean, is it because there's no going back because of the Ukraine crisis?
I think the reality is that invading Ukraine was a terrible decision, and the resistance from the Ukrainian people and the government is much stiffer than Putin expected, and Western support is much greater and more effective than he predicted. But of course, he doesn't want to lose, so the only option then is to seek increasing cooperation from those few countries willing to help. China, of course, is the most important here. It has far greater economic and diplomatic resources than North Korea, but it's vulnerable to sanctions given its reliance on exports to the West and Western technology, and there are limits to how much and how openly it can prop up Putin's war effort. So North Korea has less to lose. It has a large amount of weaponry similar to Russia's since it's based on the same Soviet models, so it makes sense for Moscow to try and consolidate the relationship.
Right, but the problem is the Pyongyang-Moscow-Beijing partnership is being framed something like Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have, right? Now, why is China, or why may China be not as enthusiastic about the trio?
Yes, China's presumably the least enthusiastic about trilateral cooperation. The reason is that it has the least to gain from it. Moscow is desperate, and if Pyongyang is interested in something, then it will definitely consider it. Also, China working more closely with North Korea for Russia's sake is another way of showing that Xi Jinping has Putin's back, and hence Russia's not going to quit. So it's the West that should step up pressure on Kyiv to compromise. North Korea gets prestige from the arrangement. North Korea's navy is not the same level as Russia's or China's, but to be asked to exercise with them would elevate its status as a military power. Also, a trilateral arrangement puts Kim on more of an equal footing with Putin and Xi Jinping. And in Xi Jinping's mind, Kim is definitely not at the same level.
Right.
And there's little inclination in Beijing to treat him like an equal. And, finally, as I mentioned before, China has more to lose in terms of its relations with the West. To be in a grouping with North Korea like this, a country sanctioned by the UN Security Council would cast China as something of a rogue state, especially when the other partner is a man who launched a war of aggression against his neighbor. So my prediction would be that we won't actually see a high level of public coordination between the three, and any important developments will mainly be between Russia and North Korea.
All right, Professor Atkinson, thank you so much for your insight this morning. You have a great week.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
If there is a Milan in Italy and Soho in the US, there is a Dongdaemun here in South Korea. But the so-called fashion mecca of Korea wasn't created overnight and still has a lot to overcome. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin has the story.
It's a regular weekday afternoon, and designer Kim Min-seok is working to bring his creative ideas to life. Kim is the head designer for a women's apparel brand that his father started 30 years ago in Dongdaemun. The Dongdaemun area of Seoul has been the cornerstone of Korean fashion for more than 60 years. Packed with giant shopping malls, wholesale, and retail stores, it's one of the few fashion hotspots in the world where everything, from design and production to retail, happens all in one place. Over the decades, Dongdaemun items have earned a reputation as being stylish, affordable, and good quality. However, the area has encountered a series of challenges since the 2010s.
It began when China decided to ban Korean culture as a response to that. While there was a bit of relief from local sales, domestic demand started dwindling with the emergence of online shopping malls hitting Dongdaemun's wholesale markets hard. To make matters worse, after COVID-19, around 70% of retail store spaces are now empty.
One effort to revitalize the Dongdaemun area is the DDF Fashion Show. Organized by the Seoul city government, the show took place for the first time this March, responding to merchants' calls for a platform to showcase their homegrown fashion brands and talented designers. For the second edition, 5 Dongdaemun-based brands were chosen, including Kim's, to introduce their latest collections. Some of these brands come from the oldest fashion markets in the area, like the Jeil Pyeonghwa Market and Cheongpyeongwa Market. For these brands, opportunities like this can serve as a jumping-off point for future success.
I look forward to more opportunities like this in the future. I hope these platforms can help raise awareness about wholesale brands like us and showcase our unique styles and trends.
It's our first time taking part in a live fashion show, so it's very nervous, but at the same time, I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity. The stage is small at the moment, but if we keep pushing forward, I think it'll expand in the future.
This is how Dongdaemun is striving to make a comeback. 송유진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the United Kingdom, where a former soldier and suspected terrorist has been charged for escaping prison. Now, the charges follow a 4-day nationwide manhunt for 21-year-old Daniel Abed Kyiv, who was caught by a plainclothes police officer on Saturday in the West London town of Northolt. Now, Kyiv was riding a bicycle at the time. The former soldier had vanished from Wandsworth prison on Wednesday morning local time. It's suspected that he escaped by attaching himself to the underside of a food delivery van. Kyiv had been awaiting trial for terrorism and Official Secrets Act offences. He is due to appear in court on Monday. Now, after weeks of criticism, suspended Spanish football president Luis Rubiales has resigned from his post at the Royal Spanish Football Federation over the so-called unwanted kiss scandal. News of his decision was released on Sunday in a clip from Piers Morgan's TV show posted on social media. Rubiales also said he has stepped down from his vice president seat on UEFA's executive committee. It comes amid backlash that erupted when Rubiales kissed player Jennifer Hermoso after she received her winner's medal following Spain's 1-0 victory over England at the Women's World Cup. And this was in the final in Sydney last month. Now, Rubiales had called the kiss mutual, but Hermoso disagreed, saying she was not respected. The backlash has cast a shadow over Spain's first ever Women's World Cup win and led to players announcing boycotts and even legal complaints against Rubiales. Now, Germany has won its first ever Basketball World Cup title after going through the tournament unbeaten. Die Mannschaft claimed the Naismith Trophy after beating opponents Serbia 83-77 in the final on Sunday in the Philippine capital of Manila. The scores were tied 47 each at halftime, but Germany had a strong third quarter, securing a 12-point lead and staying ahead until the end. Germany's previous best result was a third-place finish in 2002. The FIBA Basketball World Cup is held every 4 years, with the 2023 tournament being held in Indonesia, the Philippines and Japan. And finally, a runner has completed a 51-day charity run from Amsterdam to Kyiv. 28-year-old Dutch native Boas Krachtvig took on the challenge to raise money to buy ambulances for Ukraine and to show people just how close the war is to Western Europe. He arrived in Ukraine's capital on Sunday and was joined by hundreds of supporters for the last leg of his 2,500-kilometer journey. The run, which crossed through the Netherlands, Germany and Poland, was divided into portions of roughly 50 kilometers per day. Krachtvig said he was able to raise over $60,000 through his GoFundMe page. It's enough to buy 2 ambulances.
Good morning. We are heading into mid-September, but afternoon temperatures in many parts will be still hovering around 30 degrees Celsius this afternoon, which are 3 to 4 degrees higher than seasonal norms. Well, morning temperatures should have dropped into the teens by now, but we are having a warmer start to the day with temperature gaps of 7 to 10 degrees between lows and highs and across much of Korea. Inland regions will be mostly sunny, but east of Jeju will see rain through the first half of the day. Then there will be passing rain in the south and east of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do during the day today. Now, afternoon highs in Daegu will be hitting at 31 degrees Celsius this afternoon, while Seoul and Gwangju will be topping out at 30 degrees. This week will not be as sunny as last week. East of Gangwon-do and the south will see rain midweek, while most of Korea will see rain on Friday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day and Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.